Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with engineer Alvord Mabena, general manager, then chief executive officer, and ultimately chairman of the board of the National Railways of Zimbabwe. Enjoy this informative and inspirational conversation. Engineer Alvord Mabena, former general manager of the National Railways of Zimbabwe, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you very much, Trevor, for inviting me. Good to be with you.
Excellent. So let's start at the National Railways of Zimbabwe, Alvord, where you spent 17 years. First of all, you were the first Black general manager of the National Railways of Zimbabwe. Then you became the CEO, and then you became the chairman of the board. Walk through with us, if you may, Alvord, in terms of what were the highlights for you spending that 17 years at the National Railways of Zimbabwe?
Well, I can either start being a general manager or being an engineer from the shop floor.
Right.
When I finally became a general manager, I had actually spent quite some time on the shop floor, Trevor, as a mechanical engineer, going through all the roles of positions in mechanical engineering until I got to a higher level where I started to grow laterally in the NRZ by way of not only doing engineering, but managing the broad operations of NRZ, including traffic and accounts and finance and human capital, until I got to the apex of the management of NRZ. Maybe before I got to the general manager, I actually didn't apply for that position. I was doing my job as an engineer until I became the first Black chief mechanical engineer. And we got to a time when the government at the time was looking for an indigenous general manager. The government formed what they call a task force to interview all the managers in the NRZ, starting from the senior most to the lower levels of management, where I was, and I had not aspired to be a general manager. But then when I was interviewed by that task force, I told them and delivered what I knew of mechanical engineering and what I knew of railway operations as I saw it then and in the future. Ahead of me, there were many other officers who were aspiring for that position, who were actually much senior next to that position of general manager. But as it turns out, for some reason, I must have impressed the task force. That's where they identified me as I was, that I had the potential to become a general manager. Understandably so, mainly, Trevor, because during that time, the government has gone through a stage where there were very rapid Black promotions. In many cases, people were promoted beyond their capacity.
Right.
So I think the government at the day realized that many people who were occupying senior positions were actually operating beyond their capacity. And yet where I was, I had actually gone through the ranks. I wasn't if you put on the fast lane, if you like. So when they identified me that I had the potential, they offered me that position of being the general manager designate. So I accepted the position, which was over the heads of some officials who were senior to me. So I was put through a special program of an executive management program for a year as general manager designate. That's where I went to Penn State University for executive management programs. I went to the University of Derby and through other European railways as well to appreciate how they run their railways. And that was all in preparation for me ultimately taking over as NRZ's general manager. After my 12 months of executive management training, that's when I came back now to take over the post substantively as the new general manager of NRZ.
Let me take you back to, I mean, you were the first Black mechanical engineer. Talk to me about that experience. I mean, that must have had its own challenges, Alvord.
A lot of challenges, Trevor, excuse me, because when I started as a trainee mechanical engineer, I was the first Black trainee engineer. That was at the time when almost 90% of NRZ was predominantly white. Never mind in specialized areas like engineering. And starting from shop floor, artisans, supervisors, engineers and seniors, it was all white. So I came in there as the only Black person, also going through the training program where I was supposed to work with all these white people in their offices, on their work floor, shop floor, on their machines. There was a lot of resistance, a lot of it. They just didn't understand it. But I mean, having had my own background experience, I had the muscle to push through that, to demand what I thought I needed. So I went through the training programs as an assistant mechanical engineer, as a mechanical engineer, as an assistant chief mechanical engineer, and until I became a chief mechanical engineer. So throughout that period, you know, the mechanical engineering department in NRZ was one of the biggest departments that employed just over 5,000 employees in the whole system. And the workshops were one of the biggest workshops in Southern Africa. And looking at Bulawayo workshops and Mutare workshops. So it was quite an intensive program that took me through all aspects of engineering, because in the railways is so diverse. You can find just about every trade that you can think of. By the time you get to the top there as a chief mechanical engineer, you had to have the expertise and knowledge to drive that department for the future benefit of NRZ. So ultimately, when I got to chief mechanical engineer, again, we went through the same interview processes, and until I was recommended as a chief mechanical engineer, running the Bulawayo workshops and Mutare workshops, and running shares in Bulawayo and Gweru and Harare. So it was a pretty big department. I enjoyed it.
Do you remember the specific pushback that you had as the first Black mechanical engineer at NRZ? Do you remember? Do you have any memories of how you were treated and how you were resisted?
Very much so. I mean, look, every morning we used to have what we call production meetings, where all the supervisors in the workshops and all the engineers met together to discuss and agree on the production program of the day. The offices were kind of upstairs in the workshops. And there I was, the only black person in that meeting. Everybody else was white. And for me to start relating to them, it wasn't easy. And for them to accept me as one of them, it wasn't easy. But look, I developed this muscle to push for what I wanted. And in some cases, Trevor, when I was going around the workshops, each time I would go to the office of one of the supervisors or engineers, when they saw me coming to their office, they would just walk away. So I'd either wait for him until he comes back or I'll follow him.
Wow, wow. Talk to me now about, help us understand as briefly as you may, Alvord, how NRZ was structured. My understanding there was engineering, there was passenger services, there was goods. Could you just unpack that as briefly as possible, and the mainstay of NRZ as a business, as it were?
Yeah, now we are talking business. In this part of the world, as far as the citizens of this country are concerned, each time we talked about NRZ, everybody understood NRZ as a passengers carrying business. And yet, that wasn't the case. The core of NRZ was actually in freight. That was about 85% of NRZ business was freight. And that was the profitable side of it. That was carrying the economy of this country. That was dealing directly with all sectors of the economy. And yet, the passenger services was just 15% of the rail business, which was also loss-making. There was no way we could make it profitable in this part of the country because the very nature of our economy is such that the citizens' ability to pay is very much lower. They cannot pay the full cost of providing a passenger service. In many countries, the passenger services are simply provided as a means to an end, and they're subsidized by their respective governments. So really, to run a passenger service is just a social service. We should normally be subsidized by the government. And yet the main business, profitable business, was on the freight, which was 85% of our business. That is why, in the end, Trevor, I ended up dealing with just about all the heavy movers of industry and business you can think of in the country, because the major sectors of the economy were dependent on the rail. Whether you talk of mining or agriculture or manufacturing, they were all very much dependent on the rail.
Can we drill down, Alvord, on that particular one? Are you in a position to give us, for instance, how much mining, agriculture, and percentage contributed to the freight side of the business? I know it's been a long time.
Yeah, I think on the major sector that contributed to NRZ was agriculture. And I would explain why, because it also had the value chain. Agriculture in the sense of moving things like tobacco and maize, because there was a lot of production then. And tobacco was the main commodity for export. It was the major foreign currency earner. I would say agriculture, was about 30% of our business. And while we talk about the tobacco, it was also supported by the energy sector as well, moving coal to supply the agricultural sector, moving coal to supply the power stations, So those were the heavy industries that carried the economy of the day. And you talk about agriculture, you talk about mining, you talk about manufacturing. Together, those were more than 60% of the business. And just about every industry in the country was in one of those sectors in one form or another. The railways existed to provide a service to those industries. One important thing to know is railways was not working in isolation. Its efficiency, its capacity was determined by the size of our economy.
Right.
And they were to create a rail capacity sufficient to move all the commodities produced or required by all the sectors of the economy. We're very careful not to oversupply capacity because that was a cost. Otherwise, your rail transport service will be more expensive than it should be. That is why we had very much a good handshake with industry. They had to tell us what their production capacities were and projections were for the next 5 years. And they would also go back as NRZ and invest sufficiently enough to create that capacity to move those traffic levels as promised by the economy. And that is how we work.
Talk to me now. You've already spoken about the costs. What were your major cost centers as the National Railways of Zimbabwe, as you recollect?
Sorry, the cost? Say that again.
Your cost centers, your inputs and your requirements to run the business efficiently.
Yes. Yeah. You see, rail business is very capital intensive. So we had to make sure that we had sufficient power, what we call motive power. That is the locomotive itself. We had to make sure that we had enough wagons, because those are the ones that carry the traffic. And we had to make sure that those are to the best designs in terms of the world's best practice. And in some cases, we had to purpose design the wagon for a specific type of commodity. An example was the coal that was consumed by Zisco then. We designed special wagons specifically for use and only by Zisco. And those were wagons that were used on what you call merry-go-rounds. They were so special because you had to load them in Wanki on the run. There was no stopping. And those were extra heavy trains with specially designed locomotives. They would offload at Zisco on the run.
Wow.
So it was a round robin.
Wow. That's impressive as you're telling me that right there. I mean, that's amazing stuff. Does it still happen, Alvord? Does it still happen?
It's so painful
to
even think about it, Trevor. Because since the railways almost got dysfunctional, you can imagine all that investment cannot be used anywhere else. Because those wagons were specifically designed for Zesco. And they are stable now. They can't be used for anything.
Let's get there on that issue, Alvord, because it's hugely important. Yes. You have just said right now that NRZ was at the heart of the economy. It touched all aspects of the economy. That's not the situation right now. What goes through your mind, Alvord, when you see the NRZ in the state that it is right now?
It's a sorry state. There's no reason why we should find ourselves in this situation. And it could have been avoided. and it can be avoided. The main and major reason why there was a complete collapse was purely because of lack of vision and lack of investment. We failed to invest for the future. That's the bottom line. And as I said, the railways existed to carry the economy of this country, to serve industry. And all those industries are no more. So the railways, no matter what you want to do with it now, it cannot run on its own without industry to serve. So it was really a complete, holistic, long-range vision, economic vision, if you like. Because no matter how efficient we were to make the railways, it could not do anything on its own without any efficient economy or efficient industry to serve. So we failed to promote our own industries. We failed to have a vision for our own economy. And that is where we are today. But these things are not impossible. Let me tell you just a short story.
Yes, Alvord.
In my life, I'm not a politician, neither do I belong to any political party, but I relate very well with everybody across the divide. I used to talk with the famous Ino Sinkala that we know. I used to chat with him quite a lot, by one of my old fellows, even if I disagreed with him on many issues. One time I said to him, tell me, Mr. When we were in Gonakujingwa, when you were detained there fighting for this country, did you people really know what you would want to do with this country after you've got it?
What a question. What a question. I want to hear the answer.
So he says, no, Alvord, extreme. No, I said, look, I mean, here we are with the country in complete paralysis. And now it's clearly demonstrated that we had no clue of what we wanted to do with this country. I must tell you, Trevor, jokingly, he admitted that, Alvord, but in a way, you are right. Because now the country is in shambles. But you see, what it really needs, Trevor, it's a serious matter because we need to think beyond our time. We need to create a country for tomorrow, for our next generations, way after we are gone. And it's so easy to come up with such a roadmap. And what surprises me is that we've traveled around the whole world to see how other railways operate, how other economies operate. They have got very clear 30, 40, 50-year plans for their country across all the sectors. I'll never forget what I saw in Malaysia and in South Korea and Indonesia. They were so clear with their 50-year plans across all the sectors, regardless of the government in power. And everybody was moving in that direction. And it is possible for us to do that, and it's so easy. I think we need to get to a time when we think beyond our time.
Here's the thing, Alvord, and we move on. I don't think we are short of plans, Alvord. I see a lot of plans. It's implementation. Am I wrong?
You're very right, Trevor. I think we talk a lot of the English language. We hold a lot of meetings. We write a lot of minutes and stuff like that. What we need is the practical side of it, the delivery, make things happen. We need to make things happen. And I think that is where we are lacking. We're too much comfortable in our offices. We have to go out there and get our hands dirty and produce things and push the boundaries And these things are possible if we can lift the top off, allow people to do what they know best. I know there's a lot of skills in this country that are misplaced. They've got no space to do what they would like to do. There's a lot of this bureaucratic, if you like, entanglement. I think a lot of over control. But if we really allowed people to do what they know best and use their skills, we would move mountains if we all work together.
The last point I'm going to touch on, as far as the railways is concerned, Alvord, is the thing that breaks my heart when I drive to Bulawayo, when I get to Gweru, Dabuga, and see what was supposed to be the electrification of the Railways of Zimbabwe, which got us all so excited but got nowhere. But more than that, Alvord, equipment has been vandalized. What's happened, Alvord? What went wrong there?
It's a complete collapse of all institutions in the country. Yeah, complete collapse. We can't blame it on the railways alone, because that is a clear demonstration of what we have turned out to be as a society. We have got no respect for value, and we've got no value systems, if you like, because it's now fashionable to vandalize things, fashionable to steal, fashionable to do all the wrong things, and we're not accountable to anybody all the way up. And we do know that all those vandalism that are taking place is not done by railway employees. It's not done by a small person in the street. It is almost institutionalized.
Wow.
And there's no accountability anymore. So no matter what you build, what you come up with, someone will just move in as he likes. So unless as a country we get together and reconstitute ourselves and strengthen our own institutions and make sure that we do things the right way and hold people to account, only then can we talk about building a future Zimbabwe.
Talk to me about, was the electrification of the infrastructure the right thing? If it was, why was it stopped?
That was another paralysis of vision, because it was all aimed at providing a least cost railway service. You must remember at that time, the railways was powered mainly by coal, where we had coal-powered steam locomotives. That is a very, very inefficient means of motive power traction. Very inefficient, that has been abandoned the world over. So we moved over from steam, we went to diesel, electric-powered locomotives. Again, that was a very expensive mode of providing rail service. And more so that we had to rely on the fuel that required a lot of foreign currency, which we didn't have. So that is why we had to move further to electrifying. That is very, very cost effective. To run, you need less locomotives. You can pull more tonnages with one locomotive. You need less staff as well. So that was the vision that we were going to electrify the entire system, starting with Dabuka to Harare, which was then electrified. As we were doing that, we were looking ahead. The next leg was going to be Bulawayo to Dabuka. And then the next leg was going to be Dabuka to Beitbridge. You must also learn the bioelectrical courses. We made sure that we now the whole electrified railway system to avoid buying them in bits and pieces. So we bought 30 locomotives to service the first stage, second stage, and the third stage. But once we finished first stage, which was Dabuka to Harare, then our vision just stopped. There was a change of everything. There was less appetite for electrification.
Why?
Then
Why,
all the
Alvord?
investment,
Why?
and well, now we are going to the national policy perspective.
Aha.
There was no support now. Yeah, we support to continue with that line of investments. So we were stuck, therefore, with those diesel electric powered locomotives, which we're using, and we were stuck with these service locomotives. We were stuck with all this investment that we had made up to this day. So that investment essentially went to waste. And what is waste? We did not invest instead on anything else. We literally stopped investing in everything. In steam locomotives, in diesel-powered locomotives, in electric locomotives, in the wagons and coaches. We literally did nothing and relied on what existed.
It would appear to me, Alvord, if you could humor me here, it would appear to me that there must have been strong interests that did not want the railways to succeed, or somebody, you were stepping on somebody's toes. Are you at liberty to share why this electrification project or strategy was stymied?
I think it was broader. It was broader than just the railways, because, as I said, the railways served industry. I mean, we got to a stage, if you look, referred to as Shabani mines at the time. That was a major customer for the railways, carrying asbestos there. We know what happened to it. It was off the screen. And look at Zisco. It was a major customer for the railways. What happens is off the screen. What happened to Wanki? What is off the screen? The agricultural sector in terms of exports, off the screen. So it was cross-sectoral, where we literally stopped investing.
Wow.
And I mean, look at all our infrastructure now. It's a complete collapse. We did nothing. And that was, I think, the main source of our problems. And we are paying the price. Even if that the right things today, is going to take years to really get back to where we should be, unfortunately.
All right, then.
If you look at the rail,
proceed.
Carry on.
No, so I was saying, let's move on if we may. Let's move on if we may, Alvord. I'll take you to Emma Kandeni, Fort Rickson, 1948. One Alvord Mabena was born in that year. And you say that year has a lot of significance. Talk to me about why 1948, the year that you were born, you consider it to have been very significant.
That was very eventful year in my lifetime, because that was the end of the Second World War, and all the people in the army were coming back, particularly the regime at the time. They were passing themselves. They learned to start farming. And then Emma Kandeni was one of the places that had good soils. So that's where we were settled with my parents and my grandparents. So at the time, in their wisdom, saw it fit to come and dispossess us of the land and displace us. They literally came to survey the land, and they started telling my grandfathers and my father to move away from Emakandeni. And I can remember very well, that's where my parents left Emakandeni in 1948. I was only young at the back of my mother's back, with all my parents' belongings on a lorry. We went to a law field in the southeast at a place called Mabena, where my father started his own livelihood. But otherwise, originally we were at Makandeni. My grandparents' graves are in Makandeni, and I still have a lot of memories for it. So otherwise, all my life was that is where the new Alvord now began to see the new world.
And your father though managed to spring back and was able to get back into business and start farming and make a name for himself. Talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, I think these things they've got a lot to do with your background. I'm one of those who firmly believes that day was not by my background, where I came from. Why am I saying that? My paternal grandfather, called Stwaiza, he was a well-to-do man.
All right.
By African standards, he was rich. He had many wives, he had many cattle, and he was a good farmer. And that ended up also being a farmer. And similarly, my maternal grandfather, called Umachologwani, he was also a well-to-do person, many wives and a lot of cattle, and good farmer. So my father and my mother had that background.
Yeah.
So when they started in Berengwa, they knew what they want to do, and they had seen it before. So they believed that your livelihood belongs on your hard work. And as I grew up, I saw it happen. And I remember up to now, I grew up, how our father brought us up in terms of instilling values on us. He really entrenched those values of hard work, values of discipline, values of respect. We know exactly our boundaries. So as a result, when we grew up, we were so cultured in that home-based values throughout up to this day. What I am today is because of those values that were instilled on us. Things like stealing to us was foreign. It was strange. It was bizarre to be known as a thief. It was something unheard of.
It should be even up to now.
Yeah, all those negative things, stealing or being lazy, being jealous, all those things, they were not instilled in us. So we knew that you make yourself through hard work. And that's what we took over throughout as we grew up as well. And up to now, what we have is all because of hard work and others.
And indeed, lots of hard work principles. Talk to me about the schools that you then went to, Alvord. Which schools did you go to? Primary school and high school?
Yeah, my primary school was called in Gungumbane School. That is where I started doing up to standard 6. After that, That is where I left home, because in the area there were no schools beyond standard 6.
Right.
And my family members, they went to a school in Wanke called Semes. I went to Wanke because one of my sisters used to teach in that area. And she got me a place at St. Mary's
Okay.
secondary school in Wanke. From St. Mary's, I went to Ziligazi Secondary School.
Right.
That is where I did my O-levels. Then after finishing O-levels, that's where I brushed off to do my apprenticeship in diesel fitting.
Mm.
Then I went to Harare.
Talk to me,
And,
Alvord. Why did you decide to do diesel fitting? Where did that idea come from?
Okay. It all starts again from home.
Mm.
Because my father at home had, in his business of farming, he was mechanized. One of the things that he had a tractor there and all its implements. So somehow I developed this interest. Firstly, driving the tractor. And secondly, I used to observe him fixing the tractor whenever it broke down. I used to help him out. I used to figure out how it worked. And sometimes I thought he knew it, and I discovered that no, I think
He was winging it.
yeah. So I developed this interest, and I caught up with how things work.
Mm.
So I was very much interested in that. So it just came into my mind that I want to further this trade.
Right.
And by that time, you remember, the tradesman was very much popular.
Yeah.
With young people. Apprenticeship was, a trade to do.
Mm.
So I wanted to be a tradesperson. I wanted apprenticeship. I wanted to be able to assemble engines.
Right.
I was so passionate about it. That is why I chose to do a trade in diesel plant fitting, and that's why I went for this apprenticeship.
Right.
But I must say, when I started doing it, I never. I really believe that I made the choice. I was really enjoying it, and I was very good at it, and I was being recognized at it. I mean, things like what we call engine build-up, assembling an engine.
Mm-hmm.
I was very good at that. Troubleshooting, I was very good at that. Even my employers recognize that, I'm doing a good job. We were not being paid a lot then, but in those days, it was sufficient to give us a decent living.
Mm.
This is when I was getting income almost every other week, because my work was very impressive. Until, of course, I got to another stage where I thought I should plan my future beyond being a diesel plant fitter.
Don't go away. Thank you for watching part 1. Join us for part 2 of our conversation with engineer Alvord Mabena. See you on the other side.